Nothing fit better than that slim fit medium polo tee out the pack.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily fantasy basketball podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd and I am the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com, and you can find me on Twitter as always at redrock_bball. Today we're going to be looking at players who are in a worse situation this year in the 2019-20 NBA season than they were last year, focusing on the 15 teams in the Eastern Conference. Michael Bolton.
Let's get to it.
Let's get to it indeed. We will start by looking at the Atlanta Hawks. And the player there who's in a significantly worse situation this year than what he was last season is the blue swimmer himself, Allen Crabbe. Crabbe started about half of his games last year for the Nets, played 26 minutes a night, which was down from where he'd been the previous year. But this season, he doesn't project as a starter on this Hawks team, and I would be highly doubtful that he gets anywhere near the 26 minutes a game that he played last season. The Hawks are running with Trae Young at point guard, the old Ginger Ninja, Kevin Huerter at shooting guard. You've got Cam Reddish, who's going to be in play for some of those backup minutes there as well. You've got Evan Turner getting those minutes, DeAndre Bembry, of course, DeAndre Hunter, also likely with the starting small forward. So finding that sort of role for Crabbe, I've seen it being speculated that Crabbe may not even be an every night part of the rotation, similar to Chandler Parsons, who the Hawks also took on this offseason. Crabbe has never been an elite fantasy guy, but what he saw last season was his 2-point percentage completely fall off a cliff. Shot just 35% from 2-point range, and that will improve. He just does nothing else apart from hit threes. He still hit 2.3 per game last season as a member of the Nets, but that opportunity for Allen Crabbe this season, it just isn't going to be there on this Atlanta team. Well, I don't think it's going to be anyway, as they prioritize Huerter and Hunter and Reddish and probably Bembry all above Crabbe for this coming season. So yeah, you wouldn't be drafting him in majority of fantasy leagues. Let's look now at the Boston Celtics, and the guy that I think is in a worse situation, and this might seem a little bit weird, and that's Kemba Walker, formerly of the Charlotte Hornets. Kemba was fantastic last season, the 20th ranked player overall, averaging 25.5 points. With 6 assists and 1.2 steals. He had a usage of almost 32%, and that is why I think that he won't be as successful. So his worst spot doesn't mean he's going to be a bad player. It doesn't mean do not draft Kemba Walker or avoid any situation. He just goes to a team now that actually has good players. So in Charlotte, it was him, and he was doing absolutely everything. Heading to Boston, a couple of things. Will he play 35 minutes a night? Maybe not. We didn't see any of their players play anywhere near that amount last season, so 33, 32 for Kemba Walker. And the 32% usage just doesn't seem likely to me. Jaylen Brown will take his shots. Jason Tatum will take his shots. Enes Kanter will take his shots. Gordon Hayward will take his shots as well. All of these guys are probably more accomplished offensive players than anything that Charlotte had alongside Kemba Walker last season. So while he's still going to be excellent, and there might be an uptick in his efficiency. He had a true shooting of 56 last season. Maybe that field goal percentage goes from 43 to 45, an absolute distinct possibility. Will he ever become a guy that gets more than 6 or 7 assists a game? Seems unlikely. Are the steals magically going to go to 1.6 or 7? Unlikely. So to me, I see Kemba still being great, still being fantastic, but instead of almost 26 points a game, maybe it's 22, maybe it's 23. And that, in that upper end, the pointy end of fantasy rankings, that can drop you from the number 20 ranked player, which Kemba was last season, to the 35th, the 40th perhaps, down that far. And that to me obviously is a worse situation than where he was last year. Obviously, if in terms of his basketball career, a much better scenario to be in Boston, to be a playoff team, to be challenging up that top end of the East, but not of the East. But for fantasy basketball, the situation is not as good for Kemba Walker, I don't believe, for this coming season. Hey, if you have a differing opinion, please let me know. You can leave that in the comments below on the video or tweet it at me at redrock_bball. But that's where I'm sitting at the moment with Kemba Walker. If you are also a fantasy football player, make sure you're listening to Vinny Iyer at Locked On Fantasy Football, giving you the edge over 20 years covering fantasy football. Don't listen to the same stuff as everyone else. Go check out Vinny and the Locked On Fantasy Football podcast. You can find it wherever you download your podcasts. Let's go to the next team up on this list. We're looking at the Brooklyn Nets, the Blue Swimmers' former team. And I'm talking about Jarrett Allen, who now is in a tougher situation than last year. He was a bit disappointing last season, no doubt. Only 26 minutes a night, averaged 11 and 8.5 with 1.5 blocks. But now DeAndre Jordan's in 10. Now, I think Allen is the better option for the Nets as the starting center, but I'm also not coaching the team. Every indication to me is that Allen is going to be the favorite to be the starting center, but the favorite doesn't mean he's going to be getting 28 minutes a night consistently, or even 26 minutes a night. Maybe he plays 28 some nights and Jordan plays 20. Maybe Allen plays 22 some nights and Jordan plays 26, depending on the matchup. You could absolutely see it going that way. So Allen, while he still remains, I think, a really strong or a nice upsidey late round pick, because if he comes out and blows Jordan away, which he probably can, and they give him 30 minutes a night, I don't see them giving Jordan, who they signed to a ludicrous 4-year deal with the Nets. I don't see them playing him 17 minutes a night or anything like that. I think for Jarrett Allen, it is going to push him in a situation where not only the usage is a little bit lower, but also the playing time drops down somewhat as well. So there is some concerns there for Jarrett Allen heading into this season on the Brooklyn Nets, just mainly because of that DeAndre Jordan signing. And that just puts that extra squeeze on him. We knew last season Ed Davis was clearly the backup and not taking that starting job, but now there is a real risk that Jordan eats into Allen's playing time pretty significantly, I believe. The next team we look at, the Charlotte Hornets. It wasn't easy considering how bad they are, because lots of guys are going to be increasing their overall role for this coming year. But the player I looked at here was Marvin Williams, who's been starting at power forward for the last 5-6 seasons, probably 33 years of age now, played 28 minutes a night, and was the 130th ranked fantasy player in a per game basis last season. But from all accounts, he will not be starting this season for this team. That's still up in the air. It looks like it's going to be a Rozier, the Baconator, Dwayne Bacon, Nick Batum, Miles Bridges, Cody Zeller starting 5. Bridges played a lot at power forward down the stretch last season, and he is really, is he their best player? Maybe it's Cody Zeller still at this point. Like, who is their best player? He's definitely their best prospect, Miles Bridges. So I think, and Bridges can play the 3, he can play the 2, he played a lot of the 4. I think that Williams is going to play significantly fewer minutes this season. He wouldn't have, to me, he's never been this great fantasy option anyway. Really low upside guy who's, when you look at 9-cat rankings, his value gets just absolutely amplified because he never turns the ball over. And you know how I feel about that when every other category is a negative, which is where Williams sits. But this year, I think the minutes are going to drop significantly, and that'll push him outside the top 150 in majority of cases. I just don't see him having that same sort of role, with all indications appearing to be that Miles Bridges is going to take on that starting power forward role, play his 30 minutes plus, putting Williams in a significantly smaller backup role on this Hornets team. Now, somebody's going to have to take all of Charlotte's shots that Kemba took last season. Terry Rozier is going to do his best to make sure he gets all of them. So there are lots of shots and lots of usage to go around. That's just not Williams' game. He's not going to all of a sudden come out and drop 16 points in 18 minutes or anything like that off the bench. So his value to me is completely kaput if he was a guy that you used to rely on in those later rounds. Let's go to the Chicago Bulls. Not that hard to find the guy here who I think is in a worse spot. I think you all know who it is. It is Chris Dunn, their starting point guard from last season. Not only did they draft a point guard with the 7th pick in the draft, Kobe White, but they also signed Tomas Satoransky in free agency for a 3-year deal. There was some talk that, Jim Boylan said Chris Dunn's going to be his opening night starter. I did not interpret those comments that way. My understanding for those comments, what Boylan said, and talking to some Bulls people, is that he said we've got basically our starting 5 from last season returning and heading into camp. That's the way it sits, but there's still a lot to go under the bridge. And from my understanding with Chicago, there is almost no chance that Dunn plays a significant role on this team. Satoransky is likely to be the starter, and they'll want to give White minutes. Now, White is absolutely not ready to start. We know that. He had some struggles in Summer League. The shot didn't fall. There's some turnover problems there, but they want to develop him to become that starter probably the next season, and that's going to leave Dunn on the outside looking in. You've also got Ryan Archer-Jacquino and Big Shaq, who are capable enough point guards. Now, Chris Dunn, for all of the disappointment of last season, he was still the 86th ranked fantasy player in 30 minutes a night, only played 46 games. He got his steals, he had 6 assists. The shooting did improve. True shooting was still only 48%, which is a little bit of a worry. there, but he still has some improvement to make. I just don't see that happening for him now. I think the Bulls would love to trade him. Has he got any value left? He's already 25 years of age, and I just don't ever see him becoming an NBA caliber starter, as I've been telling you for probably the last 2 years, and it appears the Bulls have figured that out at this point, and he will not, I don't believe, be a contributor, and I wouldn't want to be looking at him as a standard league draftable player for fantasy this season. The next one we look at, we've got the Cleveland Cavaliers, who is in a worse spot this season. I'm going with Jordan Clarkson. Now, Clarkson had a pretty decent year last year. 27 minutes a night, 143rd for fantasy, 17 points per game on a huge 27% usage coming off the bench. Now, he doesn't do very much else apart from shoot, and he did it relatively efficiently. Not super efficiently, but relatively efficiently. Now, this season, we have a full year of Brandon Knight being there. Not that Knight's this great option. I don't think Clarkson's necessarily a great option either. But Darius Garland's in there. Now, he's going to be in the mix to get some of these minutes that Clarko was getting in that backup role last season. We've also got more Kevin Love, hopefully, potentially, likely to play more games, and that's again more usage that comes away from what Clarkson does. So not only do I think that his 27 minutes a game will drop, incidentally, he had 27.3 minutes per game, 27.3 usage percentage. I think both of those numbers are going to come down. Garland and Sexton taking those backcourt minutes, Love taking more shots as well. Maybe Sexton's ascension gets him more usage, maybe a little bit more for Chetty Osman there as well. I just think Clarkson, who has had real stretches of 12-team value last season, is probably going to be more relied upon as a deeper league player, and him averaging the 17 points per game that he did last season, it feels like it might be a bit of a challenge for him to get back to that level. That's one where he probably wasn't a huge draftable guy anyway, but he did have those moments last season where he was relatively useful, and he was rostered in 60% of Yahoo leagues by the end of last season as well. So was creating an impact, especially with that points category, which, despite the way people think, that is quite hard to get positive contributors in the points category off the waiver wire, so there was value there. I just think that the 27 minutes a night probably goes to 24, 25 a night, and that usage potentially drops a little bit as well for Jordy Clarkson. Let's look at the Detroit Pistons now, and the player for them who I think is in a worse situation this season versus last season is their starting point guard, Reggie Jackson. Now, Reggie Jackson, good old injury-prone Reggie Jackson, played 82 games last season. I don't think many people would actually remember the fact that Reggie Jackson played all 82 games, but even in a season where he was fully healthy, he still played just 28 minutes a night. The Pistons lost Ish Smith, but they did bring in Derrick Rose. Now, I'm not the biggest Derrick Rose fan. That's your understatement of the day. But Rose is going to come in, and to me, he is not only going to have the potential to take minutes away from Jackson, but what he will do is limit Jackson's upside to play more than that and take some of those shots away from Jackson when they play together. Jackson had a 24% usage last season. He shot 37% from three. I think Jackson's a better player than Derrick Rose, but again, I'm not coaching this team, so I don't know how they're going to run things. They also had the Shark, Bruce Brown. Baby Shark, he was playing a lot of point guard in Summer League. Luke Kennard can handle the ball a little bit. Do they look to get Kyrie Thomas involved at all on this squad? So there are some players there, and it is the last season of Jackson's contract. Could he be traded as well? There's potential there. There are other options who could really cut into not only Jackson's ability to push to 30 minutes, which I think is non-existent, but actually limit his usage and limit his role, and maybe he drops down a minute, 2 minutes per game. I just don't see this as being quite as friendly a situation for Reggie Jackson this year as what it was last year, which was one of the healthiest of his career. But even then, in saying that, he was still just the 135th ranked player in fantasy, averaging 15-4. Because he gets no steals, because he had poor field goal percentage, because he had no assists, and there is a risk that those things actually go backwards this season, which of course is far from a positive for anyone looking to get involved on the Reggie Jackson drafting bandwagon. The Indiana Pacers, who is in a worse situation for them this season? Well, the guy I've got here is Tony Warren Jr. coming across from the Phoenix Suns. Now, Warren is likely to slot in as the starting small forward there. But the thing is, he played 32 minutes a night for the Suns last season and had a usage of 22%. On this team, which is going to have Victor Oladipo back, it's going to have Jeremy Lamb and Miles Turner and Domantas Sabonis and Malcolm Brogdon. There is a lot more talent on this Pacers team versus what there was on the Suns team last season. So will Warren be able to play those 32 minutes a night when there are other guys who can push into those positions, especially when Oladipo returns, so they play Lamb in that small forward spot as well? That's a possibility. And will he get the same level of shots? And he also shot, out of nowhere, 43% from three last year. The years before that, he was like a 27% three-point shooter, and then inexplicably jumped that up, not only his attempt rate, but jumped up his shooting percentages from deep too, and I have some concerns that that might not be able to stick. He was playing a lot of power forward last season. This season, he'll be playing small forward, which has a negative impact usually on your rebound numbers. Field goal percentage, it normally impacts as well, but for Warren, he is normally quite efficient from the field, so not too much of a worry there. But he averaged 18 and 4 last year with almost 2 threes a game. I have real concerns that he'll be able to live up to those numbers as the 62nd ranked player in last season's fantasy basketball. Next, we look at the Miami Heat to see which players are in a worse situation, and I went with Justice Winslow here. Winslow played a lot of point guard last year and took a bit of a step up, 131st ranked player, but still, in that year where the iron shoulder Goran Dragic was injured for most of it, we still only saw 30 minutes a night from Winslow, averaging 12.5 with 5.5 boards and 4.3 assists. Now, Dragic is healthy. Jim Butler is around. Both of those guys are going to get ball handling priorities over Winslow. Dion Waiters is healthy as well. I just think that maybe the minutes do stay the same for Justice. We don't even know whether Justice Winslow is going to start. There's a lot of talk in Miami that it's going to be Dion Waiters at the 2, Jim Butler at the 3, which is going to push Winslow to the bench, which in itself is not a great situation. Then he also has to share those ball handling jobs. Unless they're going to put him primarily as the backup point guard, it still means that not all of his minutes are going to be as a lead ball handler, which is where that value really came from. Still struggled from the free throw line, still doesn't generate much in terms of defensive numbers. So from what we'd seen from him in the past, I think this could be a little bit of a step backwards for Justice Winslow coming up. Make sure you are listening to Locked On NFL. NFL preseason has started, and the new format of Locked On NFL is exactly what you need. With the expert analysis of the former NFL scout Matt Williamson and hosted by Brian Peacock, Locked On NFL is your daily national podcast on all things NFL. Get Matt's unique take on the game by following Locked On NFL now on your favorite podcast provider. All right. Let's move on to the next team we're going to take a look at here. Let's go to the Milwaukee Bucks, and it's Robin Lopez. It was hard to find a Bucks player who was in a significantly worse situation than last year out of their starting 5 because Eric Bledsoe's, Chris Middleton, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Brook Lopez, it's all relatively similar. You got Wesley Matthews stepping into Brogdon's spot. That's probably a better situation for Matthews. But Lopez was a guy who was putting up some decent enough numbers for the Chicago Bulls last year, especially in the second half of the season when inexplicably Jim Boylan was featuring him on offense and playing him big minutes when Wendell Carter went down. But now he comes in solely as that backup to his brother, 18, 19 minutes a night. He just is not going to have that same level of opportunity. They're also not going to run a million post-ups for Robin Lopez like Boylan and Hoiberg tended to do. So the situation for him, and he had a real history in the NBA of being a real solid back-end standard league center. That's not the case for Robin Lopez anymore, and I don't really see that pathway or upside there. Even if Brooks, say, got injured and Robin started, Budenholzer's not going to be giving all these shots to Robin Lopez and go, you just go to work at the post and you take your 10 shots in a quarter, which was a staple of a Boylan offense, or if I guess you could call it an offense for the Chicago Bulls last season. Let's look at the New York Knicks. The Fort, Kevin Knox, is the player that I have in a worse situation. Now, the Knicks team is real weird. It's really tough to work out how these roles are going to go. I posted a question on Twitter and Instagram the other day. Who is going to lead the Knicks? Who are going to be their top 3 minutes getter? Those of you on YouTube that haven't seen that, leave it in the comments below. Who do you think are going to be the top 3 minutes players for the Knicks? I think Julius Randle's locked in there. But after that, who bloody knows? I saw people mentioning Kevin Knox. I've seen people mentioning that Kevin Knox may not even literally be in the rotation for this team. That is how weird this squad is. Now, Knox was historically one of the worst rookies in NBA history last season. 29 minutes a game, extraordinarily inefficient, no assists, piss poor rebounds, absent defensive numbers, 37% shooting, true shooting of 48, really, really bad. Now, as a second-year guy, you expect a lot of this to go up, although, again, this is what I talk about when I analyze rookies. If the flaws that they had in their game and the issues that you had with them in college then appear as they are just completely there in the NBA as well, then we go, shit, it wasn't a scheme thing. Now, we talk about Kentucky bumps that players get. We'll go, maybe Knox can do more because he's coming from Kentucky and they limit what you can do. Well, it turns out no, in his rookie season, he just was exactly that same guy. And now I really don't think that 29 minutes a game that Knox played last season is going to be achievable. Now, if I was the Knicks, which I'm not, he still would be starting. I don't need to see Taj Gibson. I don't need 28 minutes of Marcus Morris for God knows what reason. I'd be putting RJ Barrett, I'd be putting Kevin Knox out there. Let's see if you guys can do anything over the next 2 to 3 years together. Maybe you can't. Probably you can't. But let's see how it goes rather than taking a guy. And they did the same with Frank Ntilikina. Ntilikina, who now is not likely to play at all this season as a lottery pick, same as Kevin Knox. After one season, they give up on him. I think there's a real chance that this happens with Knox as well. Now, I do think Knox will remain in the rotation. I just don't think he's going to be playing the 29 minutes a game that he played last season. And we know Fizdale and common sense, those two things in a sentence, they're normally only put in that sentence if you're including the words in between doesn't have a lot of. So there's not going to be, I think, a huge role for the Fort for this coming season. Let's look now at the Orlando Magic and look at someone who's in a worse situation, and it always gives me great joy to announce that it is the Chief, Al-Farouq Aminu.
Sometimes it may be good, sometimes it may be shit.
And it's really just so I can play that drop. But Aminu now goes from the starting power forward of the Portland Trailblazers to a guy who's a backup in Orlando. He played 28 minutes a night last year, 9 and 7.5. He had a 3 a game. He actually shot decently well, especially for him, 57 true shooting, but the defensive numbers really dropped off. And now he goes in behind Johnny Isaac and Aaron Gordon. The Magic almost exclusively ran a 9-man rotation last season, so he's going to get more minutes than what he would get on a standard 10-man rotation team, but that's like a 24 to 26 minute a night role for him. Step up if Gordon goes down or Isaac goes down. You don't want Aminu playing the 3, though. You want him playing the 4 behind Gordon, and that's going to... Gordon plays 34, 35 minutes. What have you got there for the Chief? 13 minutes, 17 minutes, maybe he gets to 20 and they do squeeze him into that position, which isn't his position. And the frustrating thing about Aminu here is the best power forward on this, or the best backup power forward on this roster is actually their starting small forward, and that's Isaac. So this could really have an impact on Isaac as well, just in terms of not playing the ideal position. But I just don't see how the Chief is going to get to those 28 minutes a night that he saw for Portland last season on this Magic squad, who looks to go for back-to-back playoff berths. The Philadelphia 76ers, I had a couple of options here. I went with Joshie Richardson as a player who's in a worse situation this year versus past seasons. He goes from, at times last year, and a lot of times, the number 1 offensive option on that Miami Heat team to being the number 5 option on the Sixers, behind Embiid, behind Horford, behind Simmons, and behind Tobias Harris. It is going to be tough for Richardson. Now, maybe this can allow him to focus more on those defensive numbers. His steal and block rate really did drop last season, as did his efficiency. So I could see those numbers coming back up, but he averaged almost 17 points per game and over 2 threes with 4 assists. I think there's some significant regression likely here for Joshie Richardson. And a guy who finished 75th last season, it might actually even be a struggle for Richardson to be a top 100 player in his new uniform here in Philadelphia. That's he could get there, but there is a lot of impediments for him getting to that level, just given the teammates that he is playing with and the squad that he is on for this new season as he joins the Philadelphia 76ers. Let's look at the Toronto Raptors. This was not an easy one to find a player who was going to be in a worse situation this season. And to be honest, I think I maybe bent the rules a little bit by putting Rondae Hollis-Jefferson here. Now, Hollis-Jefferson was in a really strong spot at the beginning of last season, likely to be the starting power forward for the Nets. In the end, he played only 21 minutes a night, had a groin injury to begin the season, and was out of the rotation. Now, there is no Kawhi Leonard, there is no Danny Green in Toronto, so I guess there's an opportunity for Hollis-Jefferson. He is not a small forward, in my opinion. He should be power forward exclusively. So that puts him as the backup to Pascal Siakam, and I don't think there's really any way that Hollis-Jefferson does become a standard league option this season. I think that we're going to be having the Jedi, OG Anunoby.
Hello there.
You're going to have Norm Powell, Fred VanVleet. They're going to be the 3 players, I believe, that step up into Leonard and Green's absence, and Hollis-Jefferson, or even Stanley Johnson in that mix as well. And Hollis-Jefferson really as that backup power forward with very, very limited upside. I'd be more inclined even to put Chris Boucher there as a backup power forward, to be honest, over Rondae. I think his time as a meaningful contributor in the NBA, Hollis-Jefferson, is probably done, and this situation is definitely not as favorable as where he was at this time last season for that Brooklyn Nets squad. The last team in the Eastern Conference for us to take a look at is the Washington Wizards, and I'm going to go with Bradley Beal. Much like Kemba Walker, this is not me saying that Beal is a bad player. He was the 13th ranked player last season, 25.5 points, 5 rebounds, 5.5 assists, 1.5 steal. And I can almost hear you guys typing in comments on YouTube, screaming at me, Josh, John Wall's out for the season. Who else is going to score? And that is 100% accurate. Beal is going to do so much for this team. He is going to get these assist numbers. He's going to get these rebounds. But he led the entire NBA in minutes last year, played all 82 games and played 37 minutes a night. That was absolute nonsense at that point, and there is zero chance that Beal plays 82 games and 37 minutes a night. Now, I think it's more realistic that the guy who's the only asset on your team, and you should be looking to trade him away at this point, you are not wanting, especially with a history of stress reactions in his leg, you're absolutely burning him out and playing him this many minutes. Shout out to Tom Thibodeau. So if Beal plays, no Wall there, so yeah, okay, those numbers are great, but if he plays 3-4 fewer minutes per game, that's surely a worse situation. This team stinks. So it's not that he's been supplanted by someone on the Wizards or there's someone else taking his shots. It's just that with how shit this team is, Beal is not going... They're not going to have any designs of making the playoffs. Maybe for the first month or so he goes hard and plays 35 or 36. But in the end, they're going to have to drop that load down because they don't want him playing. Nobody wants him playing 37 minutes a night. So that to me is going to put a real dampener on his overall fantasy situation for this coming NBA season. That will wrap it up for today's show. On YouTube, in the comments, I'm going to leave a link for all of the leagues that you guys can join. Head-to-head leagues, roto leagues, points leagues. That link will be in the comments below and you can go and join all of those leagues, different money types, snake drafts, auction drafts. So go and jump into those as well. Follow me on Twitter at redrock_bball and on Instagram at LockedOnFantasyBasketball as well. And if you could give this a subscribe, tell your friends, give it a thumbs up on YouTube, share it, all that great stuff. It is fantastic that you can help this show grow and help it get out to more people and get better as the season progresses. Guys, we are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya. Vander Blue.